The wind swept gently through the trees in the Hollywood Hills, brushing against the towering gates of a secluded estate nestled behind hedges and silence. It was February 13th, the night before Valentine's Day, and inside the lavish yet dimly lit home of 28-year-old Violet Gray, silence reigned. The only sounds came from a jazz record playing low and the soft hum of the night. Violet moved gracefully through her home, hands tracing the walls, her cane tapping lightly against the marble floors. Born blind, Violet had mastered the space she lived in, each corner memorized, each echo familiar. Her world was crafted from textures, scents, sounds, never sight. Still, she often wondered what it would feel like to see a sunset. Or a face. Especially now. She ran her fingers over a box on her dining table, a red envelope tucked neatly on top. Her fingers explored it with curiosity. She hadn't ordered anything. She lived alone, her privacy fiercely guarded. The gate hadn't buzzed. No one should have entered. But the envelope was warm, as if freshly handled. She opened it. Inside was a card, and though she couldn't read it, the scent hit her first, something metallic, thick. Blood. She stiffened. Then came the sound, a faint creak, like a floorboard shifting. Her body froze. She turned her head toward the hallway. "Is someone there?" she called. Silence answered. She reached for her phone. Her hand brushed the counter, but the phone wasn't where she left it. Her breath quickened. The music scratched to a stop. All she heard was her own pulse hammering in her ears. Then a whisper, barely audible, "Pretty." It came from behind her. She screamed and spun around, swinging her cane wildly, hitting only air. She backed toward the kitchen, heart thundering in her chest. But before she could turn and run, gloved hands grabbed her from behind, clamping over her mouth. She kicked and struggled, but the figure overpowered her easily. The last thing she felt before the chloroform overtook her senses was the heat of his breath against her ear, and the faintest giggle, a childlike, distorted chuckle. Violet woke to darkness. It took her several minutes to realize she wasn't in her home anymore. The air was cold, musty. The floor beneath her was concrete. Her wrists were bound in front of her, ankles tied as well. A plastic heart-shaped balloon bobbed beside her, bumping gently against her shoulder. "Happy Valentine's Day, Violet," a voice sang. It was distorted, muffled by a mask, but still disturbingly playful, like a lover trying to scare you in jest. But this was no joke. The man stepped into her range, boots thudding on the cement. She could feel his presence. Smell him. Old sweat, rotting flowers, blood. He crouched close. Violet tensed. "You're beautiful," he said. "Even if you can't see yourself." "Who are you?" she gasped. He didn't answer. A gloved finger ran across her cheek. Then, a click, camera shutter. He took a picture of her bound, frightened. A souvenir. "I'm pretty boy," he whispered. Violet's lip quivered. "You're going to help me make Valentine's Day special," he continued. "You and the others." "Others?" He stood and dragged her roughly by the arm, forcing her to her feet. Her world tilted as he shoved her forward, and she stumbled. He didn't bother guiding her. Just laughed as she collided with walls, tripped over unseen steps, her body bruising with every fall. Blood dripped from a cut on her forehead. Finally, he threw her into the back of a van. It reeked of blood, gasoline, and something worse. Something dead. She wasn't alone. She could hear breathing. Shallow. Ragged. Someone else was inside. "Please," a whisper came. Female, young. "Help me." Violet's eyes welled with tears. I can't see. I don't know where we are." "He kills them," the girl said. "One by one. He takes pictures. Plays dress up with them. Suddenly, the van doors slammed shut, sealing them into darkness and death. Meanwhile, a party was blooming in West Hollywood. At an extravagant estate bathed in red and gold decorations, the elite gathered for an exclusive Valentine's masquerade. Couples danced beneath chandeliers, laughing behind masks of silk and porcelain. Champagne flowed. Music pulsed. Outside, the van pulled to a quiet stop. Pretty Boy watched through the windshield. His mask, a porcelain face with bright blue eyes, soft lips painted in a disturbing smile, reflected faintly in the glass. He adjusted his tuxedo. Straightened his bow tie. Then turned to look at Violet and the unconscious girl beside her in the back. "You're going to be the life of the party," he said with a giggle. He stepped out, grabbed Violet by the arm, and disappeared into the night, dragging her into hell wrapped in music and candlelight. From the shadows, a monster had arrived. And the party was just beginning. The Valentine's masquerade was in full swing. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the hum of violins floated through the night air like perfume. Guests twirled in elegant dresses and tailored suits, their faces hidden behind ornate masks of gold, feathers, and velvet. Under the glow of heart-shaped chandeliers, everything shimmered, except the truth. No one noticed the tall figure in the porcelain mask slip through the gates. No one asked why his date was blindfolded and trembling. Pretty Boy moved like a phantom, graceful, quiet, deliberate. Violet, her wrists now loosely bound behind her back, stumbled beside him in her blood-streaked dress. Her knees were scraped raw. Her lips trembled. But he had warned her, "Make a sound, and I'll make it beautiful, then permanent." So, she stayed silent. The perfume of roses and champagne burned in her throat. Laughter echoed like mockery in her ears. They entered the ballroom. Eyes turned, but no one flinched. Her blindfold passed as a prop. His mask blended perfectly among the hundreds. The guests clapped, thinking it was performance art. A dark romance act, perhaps. "She's perfect," someone called. "Very method," another laughed. Pretty Boy bowed theatrically. Violet, disoriented, could only hear the sound of glasses toasting. He guided her to the center of the dance floor, where couples waltzed slowly to a haunting instrumental. His hand curled tightly around her waist as he led her into a twisted dance. To onlookers, it was enchanting. To Violet, it was hell. She could feel the blood seeping through her dress, the crusted dirt from the van still clinging to her feet. Every spin made her stomach twist. His fingers dug deep into her ribs. "Smile," he whispered, inches from her face. "Pretend you love me." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she forced her lips into a trembling smile. The dance ended. Applause erupted. And then, the real horror began. Pretty Boy bowed again, this time pulling Violet aside toward a nearby hallway. No one tried to stop them. Why would they? He was just another performer. They passed through the mansion's hallways, away from the laughter and into shadows. Music faded. Light dimmed. The scent of blood returned. He shoved open a door marked "Private" and dragged her inside. It was a dressing room, mirrors, chairs, and racks of gowns. On the floor lay a woman, strangled, her face covered with a red veil. Her mask lay shattered beside her. Violet couldn't see it, but she could feel the stillness. "Smell the decay." "I call this one Juliet," Pretty Boy said, nudging the corpse with his shoe. "She didn't like to dance." Violet whimpered. "Now, you," he continued, lifting a shimmering red dress from the rack. "Change. Be my Valentine." When she hesitated, he backhanded her so hard her ears rang. "Don't make me ugly, Violet," he whispered in a deadly tone. "You wouldn't like me ugly." She undressed with trembling hands. Her body ached. The new gown felt slick and cold, too tight. Too revealing. She hated it. Beautiful, he sighed, staring at her like she was a sculpture. Then came the camera again. Flash. Another photograph. He pocketed it lovingly and drew out a knife, long, thin, elegant. The blade gleamed under the vanity lights. Not to kill, not yet. You need a little blush, he said, and before she could move, he dragged the knife lightly across her cheek, just enough to draw blood. She screamed. From outside, no one heard. Pretty Boy admired the red line, like an artist proud of his brushstroke. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the hallway. A man's laugh, approaching footsteps. A guest, perhaps lost. Pretty Boy stood perfectly still, listening. Then smiled. Time to meet the crowd. He grabbed Violet and shoved her toward a side door. They emerged into a hallway near the ballroom. The music had shifted to something faster, more electric. The tempo mirrored Violet's heart. In the crowd, a young woman screamed. Not in fear, but in delight, as Pretty Boy twirled Violet back into the spotlight. The guests cheered again, mistaking it all for theater. Until the second body was found. A woman wandered into a guest bathroom and opened the stall to find a man slumped over the toilet, his throat slit. His mask was placed delicately on top of his head, as if repositioned post-mortem. She screamed. This time, it was real. The music screeched to a halt. People froze. Pretty Boy stopped mid-dance. His head turned slowly toward the commotion. Guests crowded the hallway. Some gasped. Others backed away. Then someone shouted, "Call the police." Panic bloomed. But Pretty Boy wasn't done. In one smooth motion, he pulled Violet close and held the knife to her throat. "Back away," he said calmly. The crowd fell silent. All illusions shattered. No more performance. No more act. Just horror. Violet sobbed as the blade pressed into her skin. From behind the mask, Pretty Boy's eyes sparkled. "This is my party now." And then, he laughed. The ballroom turned into a nightmare. Guests screamed. Some ran. Others stood frozen. As red confetti fell from the ceiling, pre-programmed as part of the show, no one could tell what was blood, and what was decoration. But Violet could smell it. She knew the night was just beginning. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Screams sliced through the air like razors as Pretty Boy stood at the center of it all, his blade glinting in the crimson light, pressed to Violet's neck. Her eyes, though blind, darted wildly beneath the blindfold, her breaths short and panicked, her body trembling in his grip. Guests scattered like frightened animals. Champagne glasses shattered on marble floors. High heels clicked furiously toward exits. But the ornate double doors at the front of the mansion were already locked. Pretty Boy had planned for this. "This is all wrong," a man muttered as he tugged furiously at the handle. "It won't open. We're trapped." Security was nowhere in sight. The two guards who had been stationed outside the ballroom now lay dead in the pool house, their radios smashed, their throats slit with surgical precision. Pretty Boy raised his voice, almost amused. "Ladies and gentlemen, what's a Valentine's party without a little heartbreak?" He shoved Violet forward. She fell hard, scraping her palms on the polished floor, but he didn't let her go far. He crouched beside her and brushed the blood-matted hair from her face with eerie tenderness. "She's my Valentine. Isn't she perfect?" he asked the crowd. "I found her all alone in her little Hollywood nest, such a delicate thing. Untouched. Unseen. Like porcelain." A guest, one of the hosts, a man named Reuben Montclair, stepped forward. Drenched in sweat, mask askew, he tried to keep his voice steady. "You don't have to do this. Just let the girl go. You can leave, take whatever you want." Pretty Boy turned his head slowly. "You want to give me something?" His voice dropped to a whisper. Give me your face. He lunged. Reuben screamed as Pretty Boy tackled him, pinning him to the floor. The crowd screamed again, rushing backward like a wave crashing away from a rock. The killer's blade sliced once, clean, brutal. A fountain of blood erupted from Reuben's mouth as Pretty Boy stood, mask still perfect, now painted in arterial red. Violet sobbed. A young woman tried to dial 911, her fingers shaking on her phone screen. But there was no signal. Static. The lines had been cut. Upstairs, a couple of guests had broken away from the madness, searching for another exit. They crept down the hallway toward the private bedrooms, unaware they were stepping deeper into the killer's maze. One of them, a woman in a gold mask, whispered, "We can climb out the window. I saw one near the guest room." Her words died as they opened the wrong door. Inside, a heart-shaped bed soaked in blood. Limbs scattered like petals. A severed head stared up from the vanity, a rose placed between its teeth. The woman screamed and vomited. Her partner pulled her away, but they weren't fast enough. From the shadows, Pretty Boy emerged. How had he gotten there? And rammed the knife through the man's throat before turning to the woman. "Shoo," he whispered as she backed against the wall. "This room's taken." She tried to run, but he was faster. The music downstairs started again, distorted and warped. A recording, preset, played a crooning 1950s love song, its sweetness turning the scene into a grotesque parody. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Down in the ballroom, Violet crawled to a pillar and curled into herself, trembling. Her world was nothing but sound and pain. She could feel her blood on the floor, taste her fear in her mouth. Then, a hand touched her shoulder. She gasped, but it wasn't Pretty Boy. It was a man in his 20s, another guest. His mask was gone, revealing a face slick with sweat and terror. "Shoo," he whispered. "I'm gonna help you, okay? My name's Adrian. Just hold on to me." She nodded, barely able to breathe. Adrian helped her to her feet and guided her toward the far end of the room, where a catering cart was toppled over. Behind it, there was a narrow hallway leading to the wine cellar. "I think we can hide down there. Maybe there's a phone." Suddenly, footsteps. Fast. Close. Pretty Boy was coming back. Adrian didn't think. He yanked Violet into the hallway and slammed the cellar door behind them. They tumbled down the steps into darkness. Upstairs, Pretty Boy paused. He tilted his head. He could hear breathing. Footsteps. But the cellar door was closed. For now. He smiled beneath his mask. "A chase," he whispered to himself. "Even better." He walked away slowly, blood dripping from his gloves like melted wax. Back in the cellar, Adrian helped Violet sit against the stone wall. "I don't know what the hell is happening," he whispered, voice cracking. "But we're gonna get out of here. I promise." Violet gripped his hand tightly. "He's not human." Adrian shook his head. "No, he's just a monster." Then something clicked in the shadows. They both froze. A recording crackled to life from an old speaker mounted in the cellar wall. Pretty Boy's voice echoed in from somewhere above, distorted and chilling. "You can hide, little mice. But every maze has its end." A pause. Then laughter. "And I always find the cheese." The cellar was colder than death. Damp stone walls pressed in from all sides, and the air reeked of mildew, blood, and something worse, something rotten and ancient, like something had died down there and never been found. Violet clung to Adrian's arm as he carefully stepped deeper into the underground maze, his phone flashlight casting long, twitching shadows along the walls. "This isn't just a wine cellar," he whispered, heart pounding. "It's massive. Like a bunker." Violet nodded, her breath shaky. "Old houses. They used to build escape tunnels back in the 30s. For the rich. Or for when things went bad. Well, things have definitely gone bad, Adrian muttered. Behind them, the cellar door above creaked open slowly with a moan that sounded almost alive. Then came the sound of heavy footsteps, measured, deliberate, echoing down the narrow stairwell. Adrian turned off his light. "Don't move," he breathed. Violet froze. For a long moment, there was only silence. But silence wasn't safety. It was the space between heartbeats. Between kills. Suddenly, a scraping sound, a blade dragging along stone. Pretty boy was coming. Adrian gripped Violet's hand tighter and guided her forward blindly, their feet shuffling across cold concrete. They turned left, then right, navigating corridors filled with broken wine racks, dust-choked air, and old furniture covered in sheets. Everything down there was forgotten. But now it felt like a graveyard. A thud echoed behind them, footsteps closer. "He's toying with us," Adrian said, voice tight with dread. "No," Violet whispered. "He's hunting." A sudden screeching noise made them both flinch, a metal gate crashing open somewhere to their left. Adrian pulled Violet toward an old service elevator at the end of the hall. Its rusted gate was ajar, the buttons broken, but there was a crawlspace beneath it, just big enough to squeeze through. "Go," Adrian said, pushing Violet down. "Crawl." She slipped into the darkness, knees scraping against the concrete. Adrian followed fast, just as a shadow rounded the corner. "Pretty boy." He moved with unnatural calm, dragging the blade along the walls like he was tracing memories. His footsteps never sped up. They didn't need to. He always knew where his prey would go. Inside the crawlspace, Violet held back sobs as Adrian helped her stand on the other side. They were now in a sealed utility room, barely lit by a flickering emergency bulb. Rusted pipes ran across the ceiling, and chains hung from exposed beams like decorations from some infernal holiday. "We can't stay here long," Adrian whispered. "If we make noise." He froze. One of the chains began to sway, slowly, without being touched. They weren't alone. Violet's mouth opened, and she felt the air shift, something breathing. Not Adrian. Not her. Something else. Suddenly, from the shadows, a click-click-click echoed, a stiletto heel tapping on the floor. But it wasn't rhythmic. It was mocking. Then a female voice, sickly sweet, childlike, wrong. "He's going to peel your face off, sweet Violet. And then he's going to wear it." Adrian turned the flashlight on and swung it around, nothing. But then, on the wall, written in lipstick. "Pretty girls don't scream. They sing." And under that, a bloodied handprint. Small. Feminine. Fresh. Adrian backed away, trying to keep himself together. "What the hell is this place?" "A shrine," Violet said hollowly. "To something that should have never been loved." The chain behind them snapped loose and fell with a deafening clang. Suddenly, the emergency bulb popped, plunging the room into total blackness. A blade scraped again. Closer. Adrian grabbed Violet's hand and rushed for a narrow gap behind the boiler. They squeezed through and dropped into another corridor, this one narrower, more claustrophobic, lined with old portraits in gold frames, each one defaced. Eyes scratched out. Faces burned. But in every one, the same masked figure stood behind the subject, watching. Pretty boy had been here long before the party. Adrian trembled. "This is where he lives." "No," Violet said softly. "This is where he waits." Then they heard it. From somewhere above them, screams. Dozens. Someone had found the locked doors. Others tried the windows. But Pretty Boy's traps were working. The guests were being picked off, one by one. Like petals from a rose. Suddenly, a figure dropped into the corridor ahead. Adrian flinched, raised his fists. But it wasn't Pretty Boy. It was a woman, blood smeared down her face, eyes wild. Her dress was torn, mask missing. She looked like she'd just crawled out of hell. "You have to help me," she cried. He's upstairs. Then her head jerked to the side with a sickening crack. She fell. Dead. Behind her stood Pretty Boy. He didn't run. He didn't speak. He simply stepped over her body and pointed the blood-slick blade at Adrian. Adrian grabbed Violet and turned to run, but the corridor behind them was now bricked up. Impossible. He looked again, stone wall, sealed. Just moments ago it had been a passage. Pretty Boy tilted his head, like a curious animal. Adrian screamed in frustration and slammed his fists against the wall. "How?" "Adrian," Violet said, her voice barely audible. "What?" "I think, this place moves." They were in his domain now. And Pretty Boy had changed the rules. The ballroom had become a mausoleum. Red streamers fluttered like entrails torn from the ceiling. Heart-shaped balloons bobbed gently across a floor slick with blood. The soft waltz music that once played from the grand piano had been replaced with a warped lullaby, notes off-key, slowed, broken. From the far corner of the room, someone sobbed. Then choked. Then went silent. Pretty Boy had returned to the surface. He moved among the survivors like a ghost, unseen until he wanted to be. Mask pristine, tuxedo soaked in red. A silent cupid of carnage. In the center of the dance floor, a woman in a sequin dress crawled on her hands and knees, one shoe missing, mascara running down her cheeks in twin black rivers. She reached for a phone, cracked, blinking, still playing the last video of someone laughing hours ago. A blade descended. Her scream was cut short. Above, from the balcony overlooking the room, Violet and Adrian watched in horror. He's killing them like it's a performance," Adrian whispered, bile rising in his throat. "Like this is his goddamn stage." Violet's unseeing eyes fluttered. Her senses were sharpened now, in ways Adrian couldn't understand. She didn't need to see what Pretty Boy was doing. She could feel it. He wants the whole house to bleed. Every room. Every guest. Adrian looked behind them, still no sign of an exit. Just endless corridors, doors that opened into brick walls, and rooms that looped into themselves like a haunted maze. They were trapped. And every second, Pretty Boy was rewriting the layout like a god scribbling nightmares into blueprints. Then they heard a voice echo from the ballroom speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this next dance is for the broken-hearted." It was Pretty Boy. His voice, distorted, deep, laced with mockery, echoed through the old house's sound system. "And remember, love is pain." The lights flickered. Spotlights activated, bathing the center of the room in a red glow. There, now propped like mannequins, stood two bodies. A man and a woman, dressed in pink and white, tied together at the wrists and ankles, their faces sewn into grotesque smiles. A mockery of romance. Then the music began. A slow, twisted waltz. And the two corpses danced. Their limbs were rigged with puppet wires, pulled from the shadows by Pretty Boy, who stood above them, manipulating their grotesque waltz like a deranged conductor. Violet turned away. "He's playing with them. With everyone. We have to stop him," Adrian said. "We can't just run anymore." Violet touched the railing. "He brought me here for a reason. I'm the center of this. I was the first." Adrian stared. "Why you?" "I don't know," she whispered. "But I think I knew him, before he wore the mask." Adrian blinked. "Wait, what?" "I don't remember clearly. But there was a boy. Quiet. Obsessed. He followed me when I used to sing. Left me notes. Flowers. They called him Pretty Boy. As a joke. Because he was anything but. Adrian's breath caught. He's doing this, for you. Violet nodded. I think he thinks this is all a gift. Suddenly, a scream rang out below. A girl, barely conscious, staggered from the hallway into the ballroom. Her legs were covered in glass shards, one eye swollen shut. She locked eyes with Pretty Boy, and fell to her knees. Please, she whimpered. I just wanted to go home. Pretty Boy walked calmly toward her. The music stopped. He tilted his head, almost sympathetic. Then he took her hand. Lifted her up. And drove a long iron nail through her throat. She didn't even scream. Just gurgled and dropped, twitching. Adrian gritted his teeth, fists clenched. We end this now. How? Adrian looked toward the ballroom stage. There, nestled behind crimson curtains, was the old sound system. Wires, lights, control panels. If he loves theatrics, he said, then we turn the stage against him. They made their way down the servants' stairwell and into the wings of the stage. Hidden in shadows, they watched as Pretty Boy began assembling more couples from the dead, posing them, arranging them, crafting a perfect Valentine's horror. Adrian slipped into the sound booth and began flicking switches. Lights burst to life. A shrill feedback echoed through the ballroom. Pretty Boy froze. A spotlight hit him dead center. And then Violet sang. From behind the curtains, she stepped into the light. No longer afraid. No longer prey. Her voice was trembling, haunted, but beautiful. A tragic melody from a lifelong past. Pretty Boy turned slowly to her. His head tilted. His body shook. Adrian whispered into the mic, remember her, you sick freak. The girl you loved in silence. She's here. And she doesn't want you. Pretty Boy began to twitch. The music from the speakers distorted further. Violet sang louder. This Valentine's for the broken, for the blind who see too late. Pretty Boy dropped to his knees. Then, he screamed. A raw, guttural sound. Not from a monster. From a broken man. He tore off his tuxedo. Slashed at his own arms. Blood sprayed across the dance floor. He reached for his mask, fingers trembling. But just before he pulled it off, the lights exploded. Darkness swallowed everything. Adrian shouted, Violet, run. But it was too late. The curtains collapsed. And Pretty Boy was gone. Vanished. The stage was empty. Except for the echo of a soft, deranged chuckle. Valentine's was far from over. The house had changed again. Gone were the velvet curtains and polished floors of the Valentine's gala. Now, the walls themselves seemed alive, breathing, pulsing, moist with something warm and crimson. Every hallway twisted like a throat, and every door led deeper into a labyrinth that had no beginning or end. Adrian held tightly to Violet's hand as they moved through the darkness, her other hand gripping the edge of the broken microphone stand like a weapon. Somewhere far behind them, the faint notes of a music box played the same haunting melody, over and over again. He's turned this house into his mind, Adrian whispered. A maze made of madness. No, Violet said. He's turned it into me. What? I'm the centerpiece. The inspiration. I think everything he's done, every room, every corpse, was part of some love letter to me. They turned a corner and entered a hallway lined with mannequins, each one wearing Violet's face. Hollow sockets. Smiling mouths. Blind eyes. All dressed in red. Adrian gagged. Jesus. Violet reached out and touched one of the mannequins gently. He's trying to make me eternal. Perfect. A doll that never ages. Never leaves. A screech echoed behind them. Then the sound of footsteps, not running, but dragging. Heavy. Measured. Pretty Boy was hunting again. They fled into another room and slammed the door shut behind them. Inside, candles flickered in a perfect circle. The walls were covered in children's drawings, crayon portraits of a stick figure girl with flowing hair, and a taller figure beside her with a blank face and a heart over his head. Dozens of them. All signed in the bottom corner, PB. Adrian moved toward the wall. He's been drawing you since childhood. Violet's hands trembled. He never stopped. He's frozen in that obsession. And it's grown into something monstrous. A crack in the wall widened, and from it, a grotesque arm reached through. Pale, blood-slicked, with pink lace wrapped around the wrist like a corsage. Pretty Boy burst through the wall like a demon. Adrian shoved Violet aside as the killer lunged. The two men crashed into the ground, grappling. Pretty Boy's blade arced downward. Adrian barely rolled away, feeling the blade slice a piece of his shoulder. Violet screamed and struck him across the back with the mic stand. Pretty Boy staggered for a moment but didn't fall. He turned toward her slowly, head tilted with what almost looked like sadness behind the mask. "Why?" she whispered, backing away, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you doing this to me?" Pretty Boy raised a single finger and tapped his heart. Then he pulled a folded, blood-stained piece of paper from his jacket and held it out. Violet took it with shaking fingers. It was a love letter. Handwritten in jagged scrawl, addressed to her. "My Violet. I watched you when no one else did. I listened when they ignored you. They laughed at me. You never did. So I made you a home of silence. So I made you a home of silence. A world of only us. We are Valentine. Forever. You don't have to see me. You already do. Pretty Boy, ***. Violet's vision blurred with tears. You're sick. Pretty Boy tilted his head. Behind the mask, his breath hitched, as if he wanted to cry, too. Then he turned his gaze to Adrian. His posture changed. Anger. Jealousy. Possession. He launched forward, slamming Adrian into the wall hard enough to crack plaster. Adrian gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. "No!" Violet screamed. "Stop!" She reached out and tore the mask from Pretty Boy's face. Beneath it was a boy, no, a man still trapped in boyhood. Soft features warped by obsession. Eyes filled with sorrow. Lips trembling. He wasn't hideous. He was empty. And for the first time, he looked directly at her. "Do you love me now?" he asked. His voice was a child's. Small. Hollow. "No," she said, her voice like ice. "I never did." The rejection shattered him. Pretty Boy roared and raised his blade. Adrian pulled a flare from his coat pocket, the emergency one he'd taken from the security desk earlier, and jammed it into Pretty Boy's chest. It ignited. Flames burst from the flare, setting Pretty Boy's tuxedo on fire. He screamed, not in pain, but in rage, and stumbled backward, flailing. Violet grabbed Adrian and dragged him out the door as smoke began filling the hallway. Behind them, Pretty Boy fell to his knees. Burning. Laughing. Sobbing. Violet turned once before they disappeared into the maze. And saw him whisper something as his skin blistered. Forever. Valentine. Then the room collapsed behind them in a surge of flame. But the house didn't die. It shifted again. Corridors snapped into new places. Stairs moved. Doors vanished. The maze was evolving. Adrian gasped, clutching his bleeding side. "He's still alive." Violet nodded. "And now, He's angry. Pretty boy had lost his love. Now he wanted revenge. And no one in this house would leave alive. Smoke curled through the air like a serpent, coiling around Violet and Adrian as they stumbled deeper into the disfigured mansion. Every corner of the once opulent Valentine party now dripped with the madness of one man's broken heart. Walls bled. Chandeliers hung like butchered carcasses. And beneath it all, like a steady pulse, was the music box, still playing that warped, haunting tune. They were nearing the heart of the house now. The end. Or the beginning of something worse. Adrian limped beside her, his shirt soaked in blood. We need to find a way out. There's gotta be a soft voice echoed from behind them. You can't leave. Not yet. Violet turned slowly. Pretty boy stood in the center of the hallway, his tuxedo scorched and melted, the mask half melted onto his face. His exposed skin was blistered and cracked, eyes still shining with twisted devotion. He looked like a corpse that refused to die. You were my Valentine, he rasped. And I wasn't done loving you yet. Violet stepped forward, shaking with rage and horror. You don't know what love is. I do. I watched you for years. I memorized your voice, your laugh, your walk. I killed for you. I built this moment, for us. You stole me, she shouted. You murdered innocent people. You turned love into a weapon. Pretty boy tilted his head. And now you're holding it. Violet glanced down. In her trembling hand, she still held the broken mic stand. A jagged, pointed piece of metal. A heartbreaker. I was going to give you everything, Pretty boy whispered, stepping closer. All I ever wanted, was to be seen. Violet felt something break inside her. A sympathy she couldn't afford. You didn't want to be seen. You wanted to own. And you can't. Not me. Not anyone. His eyes darkened. Then no one will have you. He lunged. Adrian roared, throwing himself into Pretty Boy, knocking him back, but Pretty Boy was faster now, wild with rage. He slammed Adrian into a mirror, glass exploding around them. Blood sprayed as shards drove into Adrian's back. No. Violet screamed. Pretty Boy turned to her. Say you love me, he said, voice shaking. Say it, and I'll stop. Violet stepped forward, tears in her eyes. I can't. He trembled. Why not? Because love isn't fear. Love isn't pain. It's not a mask you force someone to wear. Pretty Boy let out a low, hollow sob. Then he screamed and charged her, blade raised. She spun. And drove the mic stand through his chest. Straight into his heart. The blade pierced his back and out the other side. He stopped. His mouth opened in a silent gasp. The music box stopped. The house went still. Pretty Boy looked down at the weapon buried in his chest, then at her, those eyes wide, confused, and for the first time, scared. I thought, he whispered. You were mine. I never was. He staggered backward, blood gushing from the wound like a broken fountain. And then, slowly, he collapsed to the floor. Dead. Really dead. Violet dropped the mic stand, gasping. The house around her began to shake, walls cracking, flames leaping again. The grotesque world he'd crafted was collapsing with him. She ran to Adrian, who groaned and opened one eye. Is he? He's gone. Good. Can you move? Barely. With every ounce of strength, she helped him up. Together, they hobbled through the crumbling corridors, past corpses and cinders and broken memories. As they reached the front doors, the structure behind them gave a final groan, and the house fell inward like a dying beast. The sky greeted them in ash-gray hues. Sirens wailed in the distance. Neighbors screamed. A news chopper hovered overhead. They were found moments later by emergency responders, who pulled them away just as the final timbers collapsed into flame. Violet never looked back. She couldn't. She carried him in her mind now. The mask. The face beneath. The boy who became a monster for love. 3 months later. Violet stood in front of a gravestone. It was unmarked. No name. Just a cracked heart carved into the stone. Adrian stood beside her, still healing, one arm in a sling. "You sure about this?" he asked. She nodded. He was a monster. But once, he was a boy. Someone should remember that. She placed a single Valentine's Day card on the grave. It was blank. But inside, she'd written, "I see you now. But I will never love you." She turned and walked away. And far beneath the soil, something shifted. A soft creak. The faint sound of a music box starting again. The end.